So today we're really excited to be sharing 3 unique perspectives about the impacts of COVID in Latin America with you guys. The aim is to educate and inform about the current situation in Brazil and beyond. Furthermore, which is really exciting, is that for each person that has signed up, ACE Projects has been able to educate 30 favela residents about safety procedures moving forward in a COVID climate. And finally, as I'm sure you guys know, as you didn't pay to enter the event is free. But for those who want to contribute to our work, I believe that Izzy has put a link up in the chat, and so feel free to donate during the event. And without further ado, I would like to introduce our 3 panelists. Our first panelist is Pamella. She represents ACE Projects. She is on the ground every day in the favelas and will be providing insight to the impacts of COVID on a very, very local level and within ACE Projects and the NGO, and what it was like for us to face and run an NGO during a pandemic. And Carolina is an independent photographer based out of Rio de Janeiro. Throughout the pandemic, she has been documenting social and humanitarian issues as a result of COVID. And we're really excited to get her opinion on COVID and the power of media and the role of media in a global pandemic. And then lastly, and certainly not least, Alexandra Abello-Colak is a researcher of the Latin American and Caribbean Studies at London School of Economics and Political Science. She'll be providing insights on the impact of the pandemic on the human security of urban communities in Medellin. So yeah, everybody, welcome, and we're really excited. So let's start with Pamella and Pamela. So to start off, we'd like to speak to you about how COVID has affected the community leaders and the children that ACE work with.
Thinking about during the pandemic, we realized that the absence of the activities affected not only the leaders, but mainly the children. And our leaders were very motivated with the start of the projects to change lives inside the favelas. And with the pandemic, the feeling was of uncertainty regarding the future. And ACE tried its best to alleviate this feeling by keeping all leaders' payment currently and offering support to leaders and the community. But sadly, the access to culture, sports, and education inside the favelas is quite precarious. So children feel happy when they go training, when they go to break dance classes, and in a pandemic they had to stay at home. And this had a rather an emotional impact on children. To not be able to be inside the activities, to be inside the projects was a problem for them. They were just like very anxious, very excited, very agitated about it. And we know that inside the favelas, they don't have access to so many opportunities to have sports and culture. Inside the favelas, we don't see so many opportunities. And then when we offer them this kind of activities, we create this commitment with them, with the future. So during this pandemic, ACE were very committed with the project, and for us, it's very important to keep them safe, but also help them not give up from their dreams and desires. Yeah, this pandemic, Dylan, you know better than me, highlighted so many problems in our country, especially for people that live inside the favelas. And like I said, these people already had to deal with the problems like lack of basic sanitation, employment, access to education, security, and then comes COVID. So the favelas have been trying to survive day by day. And the most thing that I think is that we as an NGO, we are part of this. We are together trying to survive and working hard to help not only our leaders, but the kids and the community as well. And during this pandemic, like I said, ACE has donated food to families and kids, face masks, hand sanitizers. We created info videos. We moved it to our online platform to keep our leaders and kids motivated. And we try to stay connected with them, even in a virtual setting. I want to say that it's important to say that Brazil is experiencing a real challenge moment. and we don't have support from our government. The police that were supposed to help and protect us uh, are used to kill us and stop us from dreaming. And we have kids that already know what racism is, already know what violence is, and these kind of problems only reinforce the social inequality that we have here in Brazil. And that's why the NGOs plays a big role in these scenarios, because we are doing what the government don't want to do it. And because we understand the need, we understand the pain. And when you ask me what's AC doing to keep the work in the future, well, we have, during this pandemic, we realized that how important technology is to kids and the local leaders. And we understand that by adding technology to our routine, we can make our impact grow, not only in Brazil, but also around the world. And we have had good results and big transformations with the classes, especially with the football for girls and breakdancing classes. We can see how the kids have been changing because of these activities. Um, and having a digital platform for us to show how our work inside the favelas, to give us space for our leaders to show their impact and share their message with the world and affect more kids with online classes, and motivations message can be a big opportunity for us to keep growing despite the COVID, despite this pandemic and the quarantine.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also important to say that the way that kids are learning is changing a lot during this pandemic, during this quarantine. And the internet plays an important role in the questionable process. And it's important that we can guide our kids to the right direction. And that's why we understand that the education is the key for everything. And AC is now focused on this, and to give a platform to kids can express themselves, even in a quarantine, even in a pandemic moment. Um, our kids don't have access to proper education, and this kind of situation, it's really sad in Brazil. That's why we are providing this platform. We are thinking about to provide this digital platform for the leaders and the children to be able to share the message and to share the activities that we are doing inside the favelas.
COVID Latam is a collective project among 18 Latin American photographers, 9 men and 9 women, recording one virus, COVID, distributed in different cities and countries in the region, also affected and severely affected by this great global crisis. We decided to join force and approach the problem from different perspectives, and at the same time that we are very aware, careful, and respecting the health rules proposed to fight the spread of the virus. We narrate from our own quarantines, from an intimate space, and from there we approach the social context. 18 looks, 18 ways of seeing the world which complements and built among all from diversity, a narrative bridge that unites, that brings us together, that brings us closer together. It is at the same time, and we thought the COVID would make it explode on our face, this poverty, this inequality, this, but because of this maximum, for us, that it has been always like this. And like your projects, these guys, and many others. I have this photo just under this one. Please, easy if you can. Yeah, this is the graffitis with Bolsonaro's face of the virus.
What is amazing, and sorry to interrupt you. What is amazing about your work is because you show the reality through the photos, through pictures, and that is amazing because when Dylan asked me how was the quarantine inside the favela, we must realize that people that live inside the favelas already have to deal with so many problems. So we try to help them with all we can, but for really help the favelas, we must go back in the beginning. We must have access to education. We must have access to health and everything. And then we can save them from COVID.
Highlighting how this pandemic comes to Latin America, to societies that have already a massive socioeconomic problems. So all this help was still insufficient. So for example, the lockdown in Colombia lasted 160 days, but the food packages lasted 3, maximum 4 days, depending on the size of the families. And many families receive it twice or 3 times during the lockdown. So obviously that was not enough. Some of the cash transfers that people receive also could not compensate the loss of jobs and the loss of income that people have been experiencing. So this meant that many people have to rely on the type of solidarity networks that exist in these neighborhoods that become so important in these times of crisis. Many people also, were beneficiary of the support of community organizations like ACE that did a big effort in trying to provide extra food for those who were struggling and those people who were actually, falling in the cracks of the technological solution in Medellin. But many people in these communities do not have access to credits through the financial sector. So that means that they depend for their daily subsistence on an illegal credit system that is run by criminal groups. This in Medellin is called Paga Diario, something like daily payment, something like that. And this system is a very important source of income for criminal groups in the city, and it's one of the ways in which they have kind of diversified the illegal economies beyond drug trafficking in Medellin. So the problem is this economic insecurity that is linked to the pandemic is forcing people to get, into more debts in order to survive. And this means getting credits from neighbors, but also from criminal groups. And what we saw is that during the lockdown, for example, these groups still were charging, for these credits and the installments that people have to pay. And when people did not have money, they ran out of cash. Either the families were being displaced, or they were forced to give their home appliances, their furniture. So they were basically being dispossessed, obviously under the threat of violence. So this was making living conditions even harder for people. And the fear is that if the economic crisis that is gonna continue to deepen in Latin America is gonna force more people to get into this type of loan sharking and illegal credit systems, there is increased risk of violence. Is the impact that the pandemic is having on mental health for residents. And I think this is very important because the difficult economic situation and the difficult living conditions during lockdown, because people live in overcrowded houses, like in Rio de Janeiro and other communities in Latin America, means that people have to be forced to live in these high levels of stress and anxiety. People experience sleep deprivation, and that not only affect their health, but it also increases the tensions and intrafamily conflicts. Tensions between neighbors start to increase as well. So what we found is that this deterioration of mental health was contributed to tensions and conflicts that lead to other forms of violence. Because although the homicide rates, the levels of lethal violence have reduced, many of these conflicts between families, between husbands, with children and their parents, tend to be dealt with by the criminal groups. So the criminal organizations, the gangs, play a key role in these communities when it comes to responding to conflicts, and they use violence. So, for example, we found that during the pandemic, during the period of between April and May, at least 2 men, for example, in one of the communities had been lynched by the gangs. One was lynched because he was accused of trying to kill his wife. And the other one, it was a young man who was accused of stealing in the community. And then when we spoke to relatives of this young man, they told us that he was desperate because the family had run out of money, they ran out of food, and he felt a lot of pressure in trying to find some money, right? So this just shows how the risk associated to the deterioration of your mental health and the well-being of children and young people in these areas can also involve, higher risk of getting exposed to lethal violence, but also other risks as well, including, for example, being recruited by criminal groups is a very imminent risk for young people and children here. because some of these organizations use and exploit young people for selling drugs or for collecting money, extortion, they charge to residents. So what we have been seeing, not just in Medellin, but in other, even in rural areas of Colombia, where children and young people are having difficulties to accessing virtual education, or when young people and children are feeling this pressure of having to help their families to generate some income, this is actually pushing them to accept these offers made by criminal groups. And what we have seen is that in Colombia this year, for example, there has been an increase in 113% in the number of children and young people being recruited compared to last year. But they also illustrate that we need to be thinking about responses that recognize, how these problems manifest in the particular local context, and also recognize this complexity, this multidimensional nature of the threats that the pandemic has been bringing, to our societies.
Great. Well, thank you so much. Yeah, lovely. Thank you all. Everyone saying thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Stay safe.
Thank you guys.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks a lot.